My name is Madeline Dawson, I am 25 years old, and I learned the hard way that in corporate law, your worst enemies are often in the office at the end of the hall. After 5 years at Prescott & Parker, one of the most prestigious law firms in New York, I discovered that talent and dedication mean nothing when you're up against an old network of influence and deeply ingrained biases. I still remember my first day at the firm, fresh out of Yale Law School, clutching my leather portfolio like a shield. Davison Parker, the managing partner's son, gave me the grand tour. His immaculate suit and gold watch radiated the arrogance of old money. "Listen, Madeline," he said, leaning against his tempered glass desk. "This isn't some Silicon Valley tech startup. We have traditions, standards. Make sure you understand that." I understood perfectly. I was the first Asian American associate they had hired in over a decade. The message was clear: don't rock the boat. So, I worked harder than anyone else, billing more hours than any other junior associate. I took on the toughest cases, the ones buried under piles of regulations and international tax codes, while others networked at country clubs. I spent my weekends building a reputation as the go-to person for impossible cases. That's how I landed the Carlson Technologies account. Carlson was a mid-sized software company on the brink of collapse, with a CEO named Hannah Carlson, who specifically chose me after hearing about my work on a similar merger case. It should have been my big break. The Carlson account was potentially worth $50 million in legal fees. Davison Parker said during the partners' meeting, "We're confident that Madeline is the right person for this case." The other partners shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, but Hannah Carlson was determined. She wanted the associate who had solved the fusion tech case for her. For 7 months, I lived and breathed the Carlson case. I caught regulatory issues others had overlooked. I restructured their intellectual property holdings for maximum protection and developed an IPO strategy that would maximize the company's market value. Hannah didn't just become a client, she became a mentor, someone who saw beyond my last name and recognized my talent. "You remind me of myself 15 years ago," she told me one night as we reviewed the final IPO documents. "Hunger for success is important, but never let others define your limits." I should have known. It was all too perfect. 3 days before the IPO filing deadline, I arrived at the office to find my computer locked, with security standing by my desk. Davison Parker was there, holding a brown envelope with a smile that sent chills down my spine. "The Carlson documents," he said, waving the envelope. "Looks like you made unauthorized changes." Fortunately, I caught them before any real damage was done. My mind raced. Unauthorized changes? I had documented every modification, obtained approval for every revision, unless the board had called an emergency meeting. Davison continued, clearly savoring the moment. "Hannah Carlson is already on her way. I hope you can explain this." In the conference room, the next hour was a blur. Davison presented evidence of my supposed incompetence, doctored emails and altered files. He showed a manipulated timestamp, suggesting I had made changes to the documents after hours. I knew what he was doing. He was playing dirty, trying to frame me so the account would be transferred to a more trusted name. What he didn't know was that I had the evidence to expose him. But first, I had to fight for everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I knew the game was just beginning. I could have exposed Carlson Technologies to serious regulatory scrutiny. Davison Parker told the gathered partners that we needed to act quickly to protect our clients' interests. I sat there, watching years of hard work crumble in minutes, while the other partners avoided my gaze in a heavy silence, a tacit endorsement of what was happening. Only Hannah Carlson seemed skeptical. Her piercing eyes moved between Davison and me. "This is very serious," she finally said. "I'd like to review all the documentation myself. Every version, every changelog." "Of course," Davison replied with a smile that felt more like a mask. "We've prepared a full audit trail." He gestured toward a thick binder in front of him, where the records were stored. That's when I noticed the small detail that made everything click. The audit logs Davison was so proudly displaying were from the wrong document tracking system. the system the firm had replaced 3 months ago. A strange calm settled over me, the clarity that comes when you realize you've already lost everything that once seemed important. Ms. Carlson, I said, standing up slowly, these are interesting records, but perhaps we should check the current system, which we recently switched to. Davison's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. That won't be necessary, Madeline. We have all the relevant data right here, he responded confidently. It was Hannah Carlson who intervened. I would very much like to see both systems now. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Davison said hastily. The old system was corrupted during the transfer. At that moment, I pulled out my phone and opened a secure cloud drive. Strange, I commented, because I have full backups of both systems, including the original changelogs, which show exactly who modified which documents and when. The room fell silent. Davison Parker's confident expression shifted to one of worry in the blink of an eye. This is ridiculous, he stammered. Security. Get Mr. Shan Kensington out of here. I stood up, adjusting my hair, but before leaving, I turned to Hannah Carlson. Ms. Carlson, I said, I believe you'll find this interesting. I sent her a secure link to my backup, which contained all the original documents, including the legitimate changelogs. Then, I paused, looking directly at Davison Parker. Oh, and I also have security footage from the document processing room last week. Maybe you want to pay special attention to the timestamps, especially to the unauthorized changes. Davison didn't hide his disbelief. You're bluffing, he hissed. You don't have access to that footage. I smiled, remembering the nights I spent building relationships with the IT team and the security team. All the people that Davison and his partners thought were beneath their attention. Of course, I have access, Davison. You should know that, while you were at the country clubs, I was building alliances that will now make all the difference. As I walked out of the meeting room with my head held high, I could hear Hannah Carlson's voice, now firm and full of authority. No one leaves this room until I see every file. That night, I went home with the certainty that my career at Prescott & Parker was over. But as I looked at the city lights from my apartment, a smile formed on my face. I knew something Davison Parker didn't. Something that would make the next morning very, very interesting. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a typical winter morning in New England, and I was ready for whatever was coming next. It was an autumn day when I carefully prepared, choosing the best blazer my mother had given me when I graduated. I was about to face a big moment, and I remembered the lessons I learned in law school, where they always told us to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. But what they don't teach is how to recognize when the worst-case scenario arrives, and you need to wear a tailored suit while dealing with a crisis in your office. At 8 a.m., I receive a message from Emily on April 10th. You need to see this. Parker tried to access the system's backup, but the server blocked him. He's freaking out. I smiled, remembering the months of preparation I did for this moment. Over the past 7 months, I worked on Hannah Carlson's IPO, where I noticed the growing hostility from Davison Parker. That's when I started documenting everything, every meeting, phone call, document modification, everything meticulously. I also set up redundant backup systems and obtained digital signatures and timestamps to ensure the authenticity of everything. Meanwhile, an unexpected source, Beatrice Perez, a veteran paralegal, alerted me to Parker's behavior. She told me about other similar cases in the past where high-potential associates like me had been sabotaged. Manipulated documents, lost files, and even late-night visits from Parker to the document processing center were creating a network of fraud within the company. With that, I began building a parallel case, one that not only documented my work but also showed a pattern of sabotage and systematic fraud. When I received another message from Hannah Carlson about the meeting in the conference room, I prepared to finally face Davison Parker. Upon arrival, I noticed the room was filled with partners, associates, and, surprisingly, members of the company's ethics committee. The committee was investigating my evidence, and Davison Parker, usually confident, now looked nervous. During the meeting, Parker tried to discredit the evidence, claiming they were fabrications by disgruntled employees. But when Hannah asked him to let his lawyer speak, it became clear this wasn't just a meeting. It was a formal deposition. The head of the ethics committee, Mr. Shen Kensington, began reviewing the evidence, and the records clearly showed a pattern of document manipulation stretching back for years. With each question, Parker's situation grew more complicated, and his panic increased. He was facing a network of corruption that was finally being exposed. The weight of the evidence was against him, and the committee was determined to investigate everything. Can you explain how you discovered all of this? Over the next 2 hours, I presented my case with technical evidence that was indisputable: security access logs, digital signatures, footage. But the human testimony was what really shook everyone. Beatrice Perez, the veteran paralegal, described years of sabotage of promising careers and the order to alter or delete client records. Other members of Hannah Carlson's team also came forward, reporting mysterious mistakes that cost millions. With every new revelation, Davison Parker's face grew paler. The situation became even more tense when the Wall Street Journal article was mentioned, highlighting irregularities in IPOs he had managed. Parker lost his composure, accusing others of conspiring against him. But Hannah Carlson firmly challenged his claims, pointing out the mistakes he made in the IPOs and the suspicious bonuses he had received. There was no way out. Do you believe this associate over me? I'm a partner. My father founded this company. Yes, Hannah answered coldly. And I'm sure he'll be fascinated to read the preliminary report on your manipulation of the last 3 IPOs you managed. Davison tried to find allies in the room, but no one was willing to defend him. He left the room as Hannah turned to me and said, "We'd like to hire you as our in-house legal counsel. We need someone with your technical expertise and integrity." Then, Hannah made a proposal that surprised me. She wanted me to work directly for Carlson Technologies, as part of their in-house legal team. This wasn't just revenge, it was validation of my work. She also mentioned that the SEC was interested in investigating Parker's records. When he tried to protest, the situation became irreversible. Parker was removed, and his career collapsed. I felt genuine surprise. This wasn't revenge. It was my honor restored. Months later, the Carlson Technologies IPO was a success. The company was expanding globally, and I had a new position as general counsel. On my desk, a framed article from the Wall Street Journal celebrated our innovative approach in the legal field. My phone vibrated. It was a message from my father. "I saw your last case. Remember what I always say." I smiled and completed the thought mentally. Success is not about destroying your enemies, but about building something so strong that they can't ignore it. With my new position, I decided to help minority law students and speak about corporate ethics at universities. True justice is not achieved through direct confrontations, but through solid building and an unwavering commitment to the truth. That night, I had dinner with Hannah Carlson and some promising law students. Because the best revenge isn't just exposing what's wrong. It's building something better in its place. That night, his name was removed from all official paperwork, and I took on a new role as legal consultant at Carlson Technologies. Beatrice Perez, congratulating me, acknowledged that I had defeated Parker in a way different from others, through strategy and evidence, not just confronting him directly. I was reminded of my father's advice. The best way to defeat injustice is to expose it fully to the light. A year later, in my new office, watching the sunset over Boston, I learned that the investigation into Prescott and Parker had revealed decades of manipulation, resulting in a complete restructuring of the company. Several partners lost their licenses, and Davison Parker was facing criminal charges. Hannah Carlson, who started as my boss, had become a mentor, teaching me leadership with integrity in the corporate world. The Carlson Technologies IPO had been a resounding success, and now the company was expanding globally. On my desk, there was a framed copy of the Wall Street Journal article that helped take down Davison Parker, next to a recent article highlighting Carlson Technologies' innovative approach to legal issues, with my name in the spotlight. My phone vibrated with a message from my father, congratulating me and reminding me of his advice. Success is not about destroying your enemies, It's about building something so strong that they can't ignore it. Thinking about that, I reflected on all the other Davison Parkers out there, promising careers stifled by prejudice and privilege. My new position at Carlson gave me the platform to change that. We established a mentorship program for minority law students, and I started speaking at law schools about ethical corporate practices. The old guard was changing, not through direct confrontations, but through excellence and example. Davison Parker tried to end my career, but in the end, he only helped redirect it. As I left for home, I passed by the mission statement in the lobby of the legal department. The last line, which I suggested, read, "Justice prevails not by force, but by an unwavering commitment to the truth." Davison never understood that true power doesn't come from manipulation and fear, but from building something meaningful and lasting, based on a solid foundation. My phone vibrated again, with a message from Beatrice Perez, warning me about new depositions and evidence that would emerge. But that night, I had plans to have dinner with Hannah Carlson and some promising law students. After all, true revenge is not just about exposing what is wrong, but about building something great in its place.